Just continuing where I left off, I'm going to be using Bolivian blue on the dials. These tiny little pretend TV dials. Mudsy drew them on himself. Yeah. Yeah, right. And a little bit of antenna, leaving a little bit more of a stark contrast up there. When you leave a stark contrast between the highlights and the dark places, you create more of a shine. I wanted you to look like maybe plastic or metal, so that actually didn't work that good. But anyways, that's all right. I'm going to use Bolivian blue on this screen portion here, and it's a large area, so I'm going to wet it a little bit first. Keep in mind this is what Mudsy drew on the cardboard, so we don't have to be super precise about where the paint ends up, because Mudsy makes mistakes. And that's all right. I like it. And burnt umber on the shadows of the box again. I had to wait for that Bolivian blue to dry before I could come in with my burnt umber though. And a little bit of deepening of the shadows on Mudsy himself with the burnt umber. Use it sparingly because it's a very dark color. Just along the outer edges and at the darkest points on Mudsy. I don't like how wet this is going. It's going to leave lines of demarcation. So I'm going to come in with my clean, damp brush, but it's not wet, it's just slightly damp. And just go along the edges of where I've just painted, just to soften up the edges so that they're not hard edges. Hard edges are when you get a line of demarcation between one color and another. Sometimes you want that, but I just don't want it right now. You see how adding just a few shadows here and there really starts to bring dimension to the picture that you're painting. And don't be afraid to go really, really dark in the darkest shadows. That's where you get that dimensional 3D look. I'm even going to put a little bit on here. This is still burnt umber. I'm coming back in with a little bit more ginger peach just to keep this orange on this side of this dark portion of the bag. And again, just a little bit more Bolivian blue in the dark shadows of the box. Oop, that's too much. Just dabbed my brush on my towel just to get a little bit of the paint off. It was just a little too much. When you mix blues and browns, you get nice shades of gray. Sometimes even a blackish shade. See, that's way too much right there. I've got to take some of that off. I just cleaned my brush off, and I'm just lifting some of that paint off with just a bit of dampness. And then brush it onto my rag. A little bit more shadow on the side where his arm would be casting a shadow on this box. And just a little bit more underneath, I think. You just got to keep adding more and more layers of color until you're happy with how it looks. That's how I do it. A little more shadow under his chin. This is burnt umber still. It's a nice dark brown. It's the darkest brown I've got with the twinkles. A little bit of Bolivian blue under in the hole here. We're almost done. And I forgot to go and grab a pink, which I was going to do for his cheeks, so you're going to have to miss out on me doing that. Sorry. I'll catch that next time. Be careful too that when you're painting, like I'm painting the black on this orange bag right now, I'm confident that the orange is dry enough that if I were to go over the edge, it wouldn't bleed into the orange. So that's something you really should watch for, is when you're putting a dark tone near and close to or next to a light shade that you don't want bleeding together, wait until that first shade is bone dry before you add, because otherwise if they start bleeding together, it creates quite a mess, and sometimes you can't get rid of it no matter what you do. So I'm going to try to get rid of this. You watch me clean up this little mistake here where I went over the edge. I just wet it with the tip of my brush and then dab with a Kleenex. Do it a few times until you see the paper turn white. Some colors stain the paper and others don't. It just depends on what the pigment is made from. Here's another spot where I went over on the antlers. So. And one more thing for Mudsy's face. I'm not happy with how dark it is around the eyes, so I'm just going to remove a little bit of paint here in his face, just to bring his face out a little bit. Oh, and you know what? I forgot a little bit of shadow on this part of the box, so I'm going to come back in with that. We're just doing up the finishing touches now. We're almost done. Just looking at all the places that still need a little bit of color here and there. How about a ground? Let's give him a bit of ground to stand on. I'll use my burnt umber. First I'm going to wet the paper though. Just make sure that it blends out nice. It just gives them a bit of stability. You've grounded your picture by doing this. I think Mudsy's all ready for Halloween. We'll just have to put a bit of pink on his cheeks and inside of his ears. But there you go. Mudsy the Moose, all ready.